Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Senator Rob Rolison from the 39th District, which is half of Dutchess, a little bit of Putnam, and part of Orange County. It's the 39th. I live in Poughkeepsie, retired police officer, and we are here today to talk about crime victims and an agenda that our conference is going to push forward, not only to hold victims in our arms and where they need to be and the supports that they need, but also to enhance that. I wanted to just sort of tell you the genesis of this, and I first want to introduce my colleagues that are here. To my right, Senator Dean Murray. He and I are on the Victims' Crime and Correction Committee. Senator Gallivan, on my left, was on that committee for many years and was the ranking member when I first joined the Senate, and Senator Matera over here, another great member of the Long Island delegation, Senator Rhodes, another member of the Long Island delegation. And so when we talked about what we wanted to do, Senator Murray over the summer had reached out and said, hey, Senator, what do you think about crime victim forums, crime victim roundtables? And of course, we said yes. And what we did over a period of time, starting in Suffolk County, we did just that. Then in Erie County with Senator Gallivan, and then in Dutchess County, where we held one in the Poughkeepsie City Hall. There were over 40 individuals that attended these three forum/roundtables, from law enforcement, district attorneys, crime victim service providers, but most importantly, crime victims themselves and family members of crime victims. And we learned a lot. And what we're going to be doing is releasing shortly a report on those three forums. And actually, this is the report. And it will be coming out. It will be available on our website and every place that we can get it, to the crime victims providers, to law enforcement, and of course to all the individuals that participated in these forums. And I'll tell you also too, the one thing about these forums, they weren't like an hour, they were 3 hours plus, because we wanted to make sure that we heard everything that we could in that amount of time so we could make good decisions here in Albany for crime victims and their families. Senators are going to talk about a package of bills that we have and we're going to be introducing as a package. Some are already in. I want to tell you about two particular bills that I am involved with. One is a raise the age bill. Now currently we know that during the criminal justice reform that took place back in 2019, one of the components of that criminal justice reform package, which of course was unfortunately done without any input from anybody that was really in the business, so to speak, and of course not talking to crime victims and their families and survivors. This package of bills that was passed very quickly has not done what we believe it was probably in some ways intended to do. And that's a matter of debate for another time. But one of the parts of that package was raise the age, which essentially made individuals from 16 to 18 juveniles and not being held accountable for serious crimes that they commit. They're going to the family court system, which we know is a very difficult court to begin with. Family court is a very trying place for families and individuals, but to have violent individuals, people who are charged with violent crimes, many gun crimes, going there into the family court system is not good for society. It is not good for the victims that are involved with these cases. And so what's happening is, and we've seen it especially in New York City, that while shootings are down, which is a good thing, shootings involving younger shooters and younger victims is up. So what this bill would do is it would say that you're going to get a shot at going to family court for a serious violent felony, but if you commit another one while you're in the family court system, you are going to adult court. And there are ways that judges and prosecutors can do different things, and that's not has to be automatic. But it says to the gang members who are using young teenagers as the shooters for their victims is that these individuals, if they do it again, and many have, and that's the cycle that we're trying to stop, will be going to adult court to be tried and adjudicated as an adult. The other bill, which we've passed now 2 years here in the State Senate, is not moved in the State Assembly, and that is very frustrating to all of us, and especially to individuals who are working with domestic violence victims and survivors, is the lethality assessment bill. Currently, there are 3 counties in the state of New York. Dutchess County happens to be one. We started it in 2014. Westchester also, and Broome County, that are using lethality instruments at the scene of domestic violence calls, which gives the victim/survivor an indicator of her risk for further harm, and in many cases, possibly a fatality at the hands of her offender. We will continue to push for that bill. It has bipartisan support on both sides of the building, but for whatever reason, right now, we are not seeing it move in the Assembly, and of course, we're going to have more to say about that in the coming weeks, because we want to get that bill done before the end of session. And there is no reason why this bill should not be done and should be signed by the governor right away, because it is proven to save lives. I'm going to turn this over now to my colleague and my friend, Senator Dean Murray.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. We've been joined by Senators O'Mara, Helming, and Palumbo as well, so thank you guys for coming as well. I'm Senator Dean Murray from the 3rd Senate District on Long Island, and I got to tell you, just to touch briefly on what we're doing and why, and why we ended up with this Victims First agenda, this report. It's not complete yet. We're almost done. We'll have it complete either by the end of the week or the beginning of next week, and as Rob said, we will make it available. The reason we did this, and it was crystal clear today, Senator Rolison and I just left from the Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections Committee, where once again during Crime Victims Awareness Week, they had bills on there that were what we consider pro-criminal. And the problem is, and I made it clear in the committee, the problem is that the state of New York and lawmakers and policymakers don't seem to think about the other side of the coin. Once the crime is committed, the victim's forgotten. Their families, their loved ones, they're forgotten. It's all about the criminal now. And it turns from justice to rehabilitation. Everything's about rehabilitation, giving them their second chance and this, that, the other. The problem is we never think that the crime victims don't get a second chance. They're impacted for life. And in some cases, you have loved ones who are taken from you, and their family members, their loved ones, are impacted for life. So we decided, and I want to thank Leader Ort for allowing us to do this. It was after the parents and other survivors of murdered crime victims vigil last year is when I actually came up with the idea and called Senator Rolison, called the leader, and said, we have to do something. And we didn't just want to do one thing. We wanted to get input all over. So, as we said, we started on Long Island, went all the way to Buffalo, and then closed in Poughkeepsie. So we got different areas of the state, but we also got input from all angles, law enforcement, DAs, crime victims, support groups. Most importantly, we heard from the crime victims, and it was eye-opening. I learned a lot, and it led to, we're putting together a package. It's called the Victims First Agenda. It's a package of 5 bills. And then we're also, in the report, we're also pushing for some existing bills to be passed as well, and we'll talk about some of those. But I want to talk about 2 of the bills that I have introduced. The first was a direct result of the roundtable on Long Island when I first learned about abatement ab initio. What that is, for those of you, or all of you, who are saying, what is that? Abatement ab initio is a doctrine, and it's national. It's across the country, so different states handle it differently. But essentially what it says is this, and I'm going to use the case of Sarah Good, who was brutally raped and murdered and left in the woods by nothing short of a monster, Dante Taylor. Well, Dante Taylor was caught, arrested, went to court, went through the system, found guilty overwhelmingly, and sentenced to life without parole. While in prison, he took his life. Abatement ab initio says in that case, if you are convicted, you are in prison, you take your life or you die, your books are wiped clean. The conviction never occurred. Everything's off the books. Think of the impact to the families, the loved ones of the person that was taken. Now, we have with us today Sarah Good's sisters that came from Long Island to talk about this. We have Tabitha, Jennifer, and Jody. I believe Tabitha and Jennifer would like to say a few words. So if you could please come up and talk about Sarah's law, which has been introduced, which would reverse abatement ab initio. It would basically say you're convicted, you hold that conviction, it doesn't leave. But I'd like you to say a few words about it. Yep, whichever. Yep. Come on. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Tabitha Miller. Her name is Sarah Patricia Good. Sarah's my only younger sibling. She's the silliest, kindest, beautiful, go-getter 21-year-old girl who had her entire life ahead of her and her 4-year-old daughter, who is now 16. On June 7th, 2014, all of that was taken away from her. Her daughter, my mom, my entire family, and Sarah's friends. She wasn't sick. She wasn't already dying. She wasn't hurt in a freak accident. Sarah was purposely taken. Sarah was raped. Sarah was murdered. And she was left in the woods like she meant nothing to anyone. She was taken in the most horrific way possible. On June 16th of 2016, her murderer was convicted. He was served a sentence, and then he killed himself while waiting for an appeal. His sentence was vacated in March of 2018 due to abatement ab initio, an outdated legal doctrine in which each state can decide if they'll use it or not. This was a death in which he again took on his own. What is New York saying about our criminal justice process if you don't want to keep a guilty verdict on someone after they died in prison waiting for an appeal? They say that they'll allow technicalities through a very outdated doctrine, a doctrine that was made for use on criminals of tax evasion. The proof is with Sarah and my family. New York did this for a monster who was rightfully so found guilty by the justice system's jury trial of murder and rape. To me, that's just as heinous and disgusting as the crimes that he committed. Why have a judicial system if what was proven in a trial can be thrown away for no good reason anyway? What New York is doing when they vacate a conviction is telling the state to find a new murderer because this one that died in prison couldn't have done it since the appeal wasn't completed. But no one's going to find someone to accuse because the one that they found was already convicted. What New York has done in Sarah's case was not only throw her to the woods again, but they've also re-victimized my family, Sarah's daughter, my mother, and my siblings. They opened wounds we partially closed when the verdict was read that he was guilty for the murder of Sarah. Her voice was heard through us, her community, the detectives, DAs, the jury, and the judge. But New York took that and said, no, he deserves the peace of having a clean slate because he died. I'll remind you again that he didn't die by another one's hands. He chose to take the cowardly way out on his own. A murderer doesn't need justice for their own doing. Their victim deserves that justice. They need the justice that was already found before the doctrine took it away. My sister, my mom, my goddaughter, and my family deserve that justice. When will New York stop defending a criminal? When will New York start actually helping and advocating for the victims? Every year in April is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. That week started 2 days ago on April 19th for us. And I can tell you that as a secondary victim, we're still desperately looking for those victim rights. September 25th is National Remembrance Day of Murdered Victims. While we remember the victims, we all fear abatement ab initio will come and diminish the only justice we'll have for them. Having Sarah's law is what we have come to ask for you to do, help us with. Do away with using abatement ab initio, as many other states already have. This is the only logical thing to do in these situations. Victims of murders, Victims of murder lost a huge piece of their world, and in our case, a little girl who lost her whole world, her mother, who will never be given a second chance. And if you don't pass the law, you're telling her that her mother never meant anything because you're choosing a murderer over her mother who did not deserve to be murdered. Think of the victims for once, and think of all the future victims that will unfortunately come. Just hear us loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Jennifer?
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Driver. I am one of Sarah Patricia Good's older sisters. On June 7, 2014, our lives were forever changed. That was the day our sister Sarah, one of the kindest, silliest, most beautiful 21-year-olds I've ever known, was brutally taken from us. Her daughter was just 4 years old when she lost her mother in the most horrific way imaginable. She had been raped, beaten, stabbed more than 42 times, and left in the woods like a piece of garbage. On June 16, 2016, a jury made up of respected members of our community found the coward who did this to our precious Sarah guilty of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and rape. On July 26, 2016, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But instead of facing the consequences of what he did to Sarah, this coward chose to take his own life in prison on October 7, 2017. Then in March of 2018, because of an outdated and archaic legal doctrine known as abatement ab initio, every charge was erased as if the trial never happened, as if the conviction never existed, and as if Sarah's life never mattered. The evidence did not disappear. The facts didn't change. The jury's verdict did not vanish. Yet this doctrine allowed accountability to be erased and our family to be victimized all over again. What does that say about our criminal justice system if a technicality can undo an entire process while the truth remains undeniable? This did not just erase a conviction. It erased accountability, it erased justice, and it tried to erase Sarah. To rape, beat, and stab a woman more than 42 times, leaving a part of the knife in her skull, to abandon her in the woods so she would not be found. To leave behind a palm print in her blood, to have a full trial and a lawful conviction, only for it to be written off as it never happened, is a disgrace to the judicial system, to the jury, to our family, and especially to her daughter. Passing Sarah's law would give us a measure of justice. It would help ensure that no other family has to endure the added pain we've carried on top of our grief and trauma. It would mean accountability. It would mean a conviction. It would affirm the jury's verdict and show that their voices mattered. For my family, it would bring a sense of closure, something we've been searching for. And most importantly, it would show that Sarah's life mattered, not just to us, but to others as well. New York State must end this antiquated doctrine. This bill must pass. Victims must not be erased by death or by law. Sarah's life mattered. It still matters. It will always matter. And the law should reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. If there was a question as to why we did this, that's why. These are the stories. This is the side that Albany doesn't listen to. These are the incidents, the pain that doesn't go away. And yet, when they introduce these bills and this legislation and these policies to help the criminals, it just hurts the victims even more. So again, that's Sarah's Law is the name of that bill, and it would reverse abatement ab initio. If you do want to look it up, the Aaron Hernandez case in Massachusetts, the former New England Patriots player who was also convicted of murder, killed himself in prison. Massachusetts did the right thing. They reversed it. New York needs to do the same thing. I also introduced another bill, Bill S-9970, requiring DCJS to create an annual report regarding violent crime fatalities. This was at the suggestion of Teresa Bliss, who will be speaking shortly. But we already do a domestic violence fatality review team, and they do these reports. We don't do it for any other homicide, any other criminal homicide. We need these details. This will help law enforcement. It'll also help crime victims advocates and the victims as we'll gather more information. We introduced, as we said, 5 other bills, and my colleagues have some of those. I would like to bring up Senator Steve Rhodes, who has also introduced legislation as part of this package. Senator?
Thank you, Senator Murray, for your leadership, and thank you to Senator Rollison, Senator Gallivan. Really have been in the forefront of speaking out for the victims of crimes. Again, something that Albany does not seem to pay attention to. That committee's title is Crime Victim and Corrections. But crime victim, other than in the title, never seems to be spoken about in that committee. And you saw that on today's agenda, as Senator Murray alluded to. And it's a disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace. There are 3 parties in any criminal case. There's the criminal defendant, there's the police, but there is the victim of the crime. And the victim's voice needs to be heard. And these victims' voices are being heard today, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your incredibly powerful testimony, for your story, but for your decision to try and turn something horrific into something positive for future victims of crimes, in being such a passionate advocate for your sister. It's incredible. And I want to thank you for being here as well and advocating. I had introduced something as a Nassau County legislator, creating the Office of Crime Victim Advocate back in Nassau County in the aftermath of the 2019 bail reform and criminal justice reform measures that were taken by the majority in this chamber and our colleagues across the aisle in the Senate, and also then Lieutenant Governor Hochul, who approved it. It was a fantastic idea which we wanted to bring to a statewide level, because what happened in 2019 with the state's amendments to the criminal procedure law is that it gave the criminal defendant and their attorney unprecedented access in certain instances to victims, to their records, to their families, and even to the victim's home in the search for exculpatory evidence. And it really turned the victims of crimes into victims a second time by participating in the process. And these burdens may prevent, and in many instances have prevented, the victims of crimes from coming forward, because it's a disincentive for them to report crimes in the first instance. And at a time when they need the help the most, it should not be the duty of a victim to understand the complexities of the law and the criminal justice procedure to protect their own rights. And so the idea behind the bill, you've got prosecutors who are there to represent the rights, obviously, of the state and the people of the state of New York. You've got the criminal defendant has their counsel to represent their interests. The idea behind the crime victim advocate is that you would have someone who is there to legally represent the rights and interests of the victim of the crime and their family. This bill, S-7296, establishes the Division of Crime Victims Statewide Advocate as part of the Office of Victim Services to increase the services that are provided to victims and to ensure that their legal rights are protected. The Office of Victim Services will currently provide some services to crime victims, including financial assistance, counseling, and legal help and emergency sheltering. But the bill actually expands that. The Office of Crime Victims Statewide Advocate expands upon these services by providing victims with actual legal representation to victims and the witnesses of crime, legal assistance with victims' compensation applications, information on legal rights and protections regarding the criminal justice process, and will actually assist the victims in submitting motions to quash in submitting applications for protective orders, in comments and statements, in preparation of comments and statements to courts and to parole boards. Instead of leaving victims there adrift, as the current criminal justice system does, it actually provides an advocate to fight for the rights of victims, specifically when the rights of criminal defendants and the rights of the state are already protected. It gives them a voice and gives someone to fight on their behalf to ensure that they're not victimized again. Again, Senator Murray, I want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking about the bill and honored that it's included as part of this package. Thank you.
By the way, we've also been joined by Senator Steck. Thank you, Senator. I'd like next to call up our senator from the Buffalo area who hosted one of these roundtables, and that is Senator Patrick Gallivan.
Thanks, Senator. Thanks. I've been involved in some way, shape, or form with victims, trying to help victims for over 40 years, first as a state trooper, then as a sheriff of Erie County, and for a period of time as a member of the parole board, where every Friday I sat through victim impact panels, listening to victims and their families describe what they've gone through, the things that were taken away from them, the impact on their lives, the impact on their futures, and how devastating it was them to be a victim of a crime. And then, of course, in the legislature. And the one thing that I can say, the common theme over that 40-plus years is that New York State does not do enough for victims, particularly since 2019, where we've seen criminal justice policies coming from the state that favor offenders over law-abiding citizens, that favor offenders over communities, and that favor offenders over victims. Clearly, we all believe that that has to stop. And I want to thank my colleagues for their, first for putting together the idea of these panels across the state, and of course for the families, the victims' families that are here today to talk about their experience. You know, you've heard a little bit about these panels and the testimony that came from prosecutors, it came from law enforcement, it came from victims advocacy groups, it came from victims themselves. And I think they spoke up loud and clear to say that we need to do more. And I'm very pleased that my colleagues are willing to stand up and try to do more. And of course, you'll see the report that comes out and the package of proposals where we can hopefully do a much better job in New York State of providing services to victims, of paying attention to victims, and attempting to enact policies that create fewer victims. That's kind of an awkward way to say we want to get rid of crime, that we want to do better, we want to make our communities safer, and we want to reduce victimization. One of the pieces, one of the interesting things to me anyway that came out from the victim advocate groups had to do with the area of domestic violence and the increased role or the knowledge that we have of the role of strangulation in domestic violence cases. The Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, they say that up to 80% of abused women will experience near-fatal strangulation. And those victims who experience non-fatal strangulation by a partner are 750% more likely to be murdered by that partner in the future. Now, we do have a series of laws in New York State that deals with strangulation, but prosecutors, police, and others do not have a great awareness of the role that strangulation plays in these types of cases and the subsequent violence. And they've pointed out that our laws are unclear. They're a little murky in this and need to be cleaned up. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're not going to put forward proposals to enhance penalties because the penalties are severe enough, starting with a misdemeanor, going up through a couple different steps of felonies when you get to strangulation in the first degree. But the murkiness of these laws and the fact that the laws are not clear enough have really created problems when it comes to prosecutions for strangulation. And so what's happening is there might be a particular charge at the different level of strangulation, But then because the way that their laws are set up, it's very difficult to prove the case the way that the laws are written, and so the perpetrators are walking away, and what happens next, of course? They repeat, and it escalates and gets more and more serious, and in a number of cases across the state, it has led to one partner killing another partner. And this is something that we can prevent by simply changing the law and clearing it up. And so that will be a part of the package that gets put forward. You've heard some of the other proposals that are very clear and very straightforward and make clear where we stand with victims, with law-abiding citizens, and it's time for New York State to do more. Thank you. Dean.
Thank you, Senator Gallivan. So just briefly, we're about to close it up, but briefly I want to say this, that in addition, this report will consist of the 5 bills we just discussed, but it also has suggestions on changes to existing policy as well as other legislation that we feel should be passed, such as the PROTECT Act, such as some of the legislation that deals with discovery reforms. But the report itself also covers, if I can find my sheet here, suggestions on things that we can do better, such as complete review of SORA, the Sex Offender Registry Act. Has not been reviewed in decades. Lethality assessments, discovery rules reviews, and victim notification and participation in the entire process. All of that will be part of this report that we've put together. And we got all of the ideas, all of the information because we did the roundtables. And I'd like to call up, who also traveled from Long Island today to come up, Teresa and David Bliss. I'd like to call Teresa up to just kind of close. Teresa has been in constant contact with us, going over, and she was the one who suggested one of the bills that I'm introducing. But she's been in constant contact, a great advocate. But I want her to close it out, and you to hear from her as to why this is important, why victims need to be heard. Teresa?
Thank you, Senator Murray. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the legislators who have made these roundtables possible, especially Senator Dean Murray. I have to say we are very lucky in the 3rd District. He has consistently shown up for victims, not just in words, but in action. He understands that behind every crime is a family whose life has been forever changed. We all came to these roundtables not as politicians, but as parents, as family members, as survivors, as advocates, asking for one simple thing: to be heard. Sounds simple, right? But the truth is, it's not. Far too often, our voices and stories are not part of the conversation under the current majority, even as lawmakers put policies in place that directly impact our lives. Thanks to these roundtables, for once, the people most affected were not on the sidelines. We were at the table. We were listened to, and what we had to say mattered. Because being heard should never be optional. It should be the foundation of justice. And when lawmakers take the time to truly listen to victims and grieving families, you don't just hear our pain. You start to understand the gaps in the system, the failures that contributed to preventable crimes, and the changes that are desperately needed. As Senator Murray mentioned, my testimony was the inspiration for Senate Bill S-9970, which would require an annual report on perpetrators of violent crimes resulting in the death of a crime victim. On March 24, 2021, my 25-year-old son, David Bliss, was murdered in broad daylight by a group of 3 individuals, complete strangers to my son. The person who shot my son was already under probation supervision for a prior violent stabbing. That case had been reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor, and he was given probation instead of incarceration. While under supervision, he built ghost guns. He regularly carried a loaded handgun and frequently used marijuana, all clear violations of supervision conditions. Yet, no enforcement action was taken. Probation failed to properly intervene, and they dropped the ball. The systemic breakdowns did not end there, and our family experienced further failures that compounded our trauma. After David was shot, we had no idea where he was taken. I had called hospitals, I called the police precinct. I was even questioned by the desk officer, but given no answers. We raced to one hospital only to be told he wasn't there. In a panic, we then showed up to the police precinct in person. We walked in, a family visibly in crisis, only to be told to wait outside in our car. And someone would be here to talk to us. Well, in our car, alone, in the parking lot, with no support, no guidance, and no information. And then while we were waiting there in the car, we found out from a local news outlet on social media that David was fatally shot and had died. This is how we found out. Because his name had already been unlawfully released within hours by the local mayor, who was too busy making grossly inaccurate public statements before law enforcement had even gathered all the facts. Those statements then led the public to make harmful assumptions. We were never properly notified by law enforcement, and we were never contacted by the hospital. There was clearly no system in place to ensure communication with our family during those critical hours. What happened to us illustrates not one failure, but a series of failures across the system, from probation oversight, interagency communication, and the complete absence of a dignified, proper victim notification. This also highlights a clear gap. Families need support in real time. That's why there needs to be trained on-call victim liaisons in every precinct. Because what we experienced was not just a huge failure in the process, it was a failure in ethics, human decency, and respect. Senate Bill S-9970 would require the state to produce an annual report analyzing perpetrators of fatal violent crimes. Every homicide should force the state to ask, what went wrong? And how do we make sure it never happens again? Data isn't just numbers, it's answers, and families like mine deserve answers. This bill is a step toward making sure those answers can no longer be ignored.
Thank you. So in closing, I just want to say this. This is not a one-off. We did this to gather information, but I assure you this conference will always stand with our victims and support them and give them the help that we need. Now what we need to do, pass these bills, make these changes, and again, continue to fight for the people that didn't choose to be victims. With that, we'll take any questions. Okay, very good. Thank you very much.